Welcome to Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And first of all, I wanted to, just say to everybody, happy 2026. And I know that a lot of people are getting geared up right now for heading out to JP Morgan and getting all set for that event. And so I wish you the best at JP Morgan this year. Today on the Life Science Success podcast, I also want to welcome in my guest to the podcast, Manfred Stapff. Manfred is an MD, a PhD, a physician, and clinical research leader with 30 plus years in drug development, regulatory affairs, and real world evidence. He's a founder of Candid Advisory, where he helps organizations to use real world data and AI to improve decisions. And he's also the author of Real World Evidence Unveiled on Navigating Misinformation. And so, with that, I wanted to welcome you, Manfred, to the podcast. And I know that you want to spend quite a bit of time talking about the book as well. And so we'll make sure that you dive right into that too. But welcome and happy 2026 to you.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much for having me. Also, Happy New Year. I used to say, make it short, may the new year bring more good things than bad things. I think with this, you cannot be wrong. So, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. And let's have a little bit of a talk about what we can do in life science and in research and in all these other things.
That'll be perfect. So before we get started in, everything else related to all the stuff that you're currently doing in life sciences, can you tell the listeners just a little bit about your background and what is it that led you from clinical medicine into clinical research and regulatory affairs?
Yeah, I mean, if we have 30 hours time, I can tell you the 30 years, but I will try to shorten it a little bit. As you already mentioned, I'm a physician by training. I started in clinical medicine. I always mention my very first job when I came as a young physician in my very first job, which was the German Air Force. At that time, German was a country with a draft system, so everybody who was able and above 18 years had to go to the military. I had the lucky situation that they took me after medical school. So this is certainly a little bit more attractive position. But if you come there as a young physician with a relative limited practical knowledge, of course, you experience quite a lot of challenges. If you come with the helicopter to a crashed tornado airplane and you do not really know what to expect. So this forms you a little bit for your future, how to handle unexpected situations without freaking out. Especially when you are watched by the other soldiers and they expect you to do something. This is the reason why I often mention it, and I don't delete it from my CV. Many people say, oh, whatever is older than 20 years in your CV or in your LinkedIn profile, you don't mention it. It doesn't matter. I would say it matters because sometimes your early experience in life or your early experience in your professional career, they shape you for your further career and for your future. So that's also a reason why I mention it and spend more time on this specific step than I actually should. So after the military, I did a regular clinical life in Munich University Clinic in the morning, outpatients in the afternoon, inpatients, focus on cardiovascular diseases, immunologic diseases. And at that time, also the HIV epidemic started. And as a physician, I was always a little bit dissatisfied with the therapeutic options at that time for HIV patients. So this was one of many triggers which motivated me to go into the pharmaceutical industry and to contribute to research, to new therapy, to bring some good things to the patients. So I started in Germany in the German subsidiary of a well-known American company and did clinical trials, clinical monitoring. At that time, the GCP regulations had to be implemented. So it was a mix of following rules and having a little bit of a scientific freedom. And then when you do career in a subsidiary, sooner or later, the career connects you to headquarters. So that's the time when I went to the United States, did operations in global clinical trials in the same company. As we all know, in the pharmaceutical and biotech world, there are very often mergers and acquisitions, and it happens. And when it happens, then you get perhaps lucky and you can stay, or you get laid off, or you take an offer. So I took the offer, changed the company to another company, an American company. Again, the clinical part, but a little bit more regulatory part also. And as you know, mergers and acquisitions happen, and so they happen again. And you take an offer and do something different. And this was a little bit of a pivotal moment because I got to know a startup company in Cambridge who worked with electronic medical records. Initially, to improve clinical trials, meaning feasibility, checking the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and to check whether such patients actually exist in real life. These people who write clinical study protocols, they are very, very smart people. They put the highest standard of science into a study protocol. It's absolutely okay, absolutely correct, but sometimes it creates the picture of a patient which does not exist in real life. And this
Mhm.
was uh, the target of this startup company, to help clinical trials to be more realistic, and also to learn a little bit more about how do these patients look in real life, because real world data, as the name says, come from real world, come from the day-to-day interaction between patients and physicians. They come from electronic medical records, hospital records, or from other kind of electronic means, but they reflect the reality. And this really impressed me. So I continued building, contributed building this company. And once the company was a really successful company and now is one of the largest global electronic medical records real world data company, it was again time to change. And I went a little bit back to life science company, and also build up a team in Cambridge. And then I took a little bit of a career break. And during the career break, many people, they do hobbies, boating, fishing, yoga in India, or whatever they want to do. I try to be still connected with research, doing publications, doing podcasts, writing a book, to just summarize basically what I have learned in these many, many years of career. And very often writing the book is a little bit more for the author themselves rather than making some money or some business. But still, it needs to be sold. So the name of the book is Real World Evidence Unveiled, Navigating the Maze of Modern Misinformation. And it combines the methods which are in the research world, in the medical world, with our daily activity. Also, in the daily activity, we get overwhelmed by information
Mhm.
in cable TV and in social media. There are headlines, there are uh, ideologic statements, and we absorb them, but we never check them. We never go into the sources. We never fact check them, and we react to it and multiply it. And the book is supposed also to motivate a little bit. Do not blindly follow an ideology, a sentence just because it sounds good. Uh, Go behind it, go behind the scenes, even if it takes a few minutes or sometimes a few hours or sometimes a few days. But
Yeah.
contribute to distribute the truth instead of distributing fake news or misinformation.
I do
So,
find it
and here I
interesting
am.
that we're gonna have to be, especially with AI, we're gonna have to be much more critical thinkers. But I think there are a lot of people, whether it's an AI video, that they claim is true, a picture that they claim is true, or text, all three, you're going to have to not just use your eyes and your basic senses. You're going to actually really have to engage your brain to understand, is this thing really um valuable or not. I guess, is that one of the main problems that you get into, or what was the main problem that you're trying to solve with the book? What sort of things are you trying to
Yeah,
uncover with your
so
book?
initially the problem to be solved with real world data itself was to bridge clinical trials to reality, to accept that there are differences. Clinical trials have a highly selected population,
Mhm.
and real world evidence come from the day-to-day business. So this was the initial one. Then the next step was really to apply that into real world, and was eventually the motivation to write the book. I see, by the way, that my picture here, my video is stuck, so I do not know whether you still can hear me or whether we have any transmission.
Oh, well, I had no transmission problems until you mentioned it. So now that you said it, it's stuck on my end as well. So hopefully we get Manfred back here. And let me check the feed while I'm at that. But any of you who have watched for a while would know, we are um, live, and because we are live, that sometimes causes issues. So we will see if we get Manfred back. Manfred, can you hear me yet? Nope. Looks like there's some sort of an issue, and now the feed is actually caught up overall with things. So now I could start to see whether or not, if there's an actual problem, getting to LinkedIn, or if it's possibly on Manfred's end, which that could very well be. With that being the case, we'll just wait for him to come back for this interesting interview on him and his book. And obviously, if we don't get him back right away, we'll just conclude and then get him back rescheduled. But hopefully, he'll be able to get right back on as well. I do think, while we're waiting, I do think that one of the things with regards to a lot of this information, looks like it's circling on my end now too, as well. So that's why I paused for a second here to see. I have you back, but I need to test my connection here though too. Hold on one second. We're still live, by the way, hopefully. So I haven't clicked any button to end it or anything like that. I just wanted to, for anybody that's with us, I want to test the connection here, make sure that the connection speed isn't on my end a problem. Just about to do that right as you joined, and then it said that there's some sort of recording problem too. So I'm a bit worried about the recording and things like that at this point too. So let me just double check on my phone. And regardless, what we could do is just um, record you if there is a problem with the live one, and then I'll. No, looks like me saying, "Hey, you're back." Isn't on my end a problem? Yeah, there we go. So we are back. You were explaining though, um, Manfred, you were explaining a little bit about the book and kind of the problem that you set out to solve. And obviously, for the audio version of this, we'll edit this, but for the live version, we've got a little bit of a technical issue that we worked through. So thanks for coming back.
Yeah, so I'm not sure when the connection failed, in which type of the sentence or the explanation, but I will try to repeat a little bit. So, as I said earlier, the initial driver for the book was obviously to just summarize how real world data can help the artificial environment of clinical trials. And then I realized this is actually an issue which we face in daily life when we see headlines, uh, ideologic statements, uh, social media comments, and they need to be checked. They need to be verified. They need to be fact checked before we communicate them. So we contribute to distributing the truth instead of distributing fake news or misleading, what in earlier days it was rumors. They were told, people whispered to each other, and at the end of the whispering chain something completely different came out. So we have this problem also. It's just the technology is a little bit new, a little bit different, and this drove me to write this book and have a mixture of some scientific part, but also some part which applies to anybody in real life. Yeah, so you do not have to be a statistician or a medical profession or a researcher to find some nice things in this book and some hints and some truth.
Very good. So, could you give us a concrete example of a project where real world evidence changed a development or regulatory decision in ways traditional trials alone wouldn't have actually
Yeah,
found that?
yeah, yeah. So actually, one thought in the beginning that the regulatory agency would be very critical, because one of the major points which people see as a critique on real world data is, are they reliable? Are they for real? Are they truth? Are they over coded to get a little bit more from the health insurance? Are there missing data which would be needed? All these kind of quality aspects. And first, you can, of course, address this by introducing quality control and a robust quality management when you deal with this data, either as a data provider or a data collector or a data broker. There should be quality mechanisms in there to increase the trust. And there are various techniques one can do, and we can talk about it later. Uh, but one assumed that the regulatory agencies would be very hesitant, and actually they were not so hesitant. Of course, they have to look at the quality. They have to look whether the data or the science which they use to base their decision on is really good, robust science. But they used real world data relatively early. They started with, for example, tacrolimus, an anti inflammatory anti-rejection reaction in the transplant uh, history, and it was on the market quite a long time. So if something is quite a long time on the market, of course, it is used within the label, but it's also used off label. So you can easily collect the real world data of this off label use, apply the same statistical rigidity as you would do in a clinical trial, also apply some quality standards and data completeness standards. And actually, tacrolimus got a new indication for specific types of tumors or for specific types of uh, transplant receivers, purely on real world data.
Hmm.
It also happened in the medical device industry. Uh, Cardiac valve replacements have different methods, and these different methods also ended up in different indications where you could use this device. And also a different implantation method was solely approved based on real world data. I could also imagine, we are not there yet completely, but I could also imagine the hype of about GLP-1 agonists Currently, indications are done by clinical trials. Just recently, another clinical trial came out with cardiovascular prevention data. But if a product is on the market already since several years, one has to say, then it's relatively convenient to use real world data for specific indications or for specific outcomes. And if you have a smart way to do it, meaning smart quality wise and definition of outcomes, then you can use this data and try to get an additional indication, especially in the GLP-1 world. I think the book is not yet closed what these products actually can do. The story of GLP-1 is not yet finished, not in terms of efficacy and outcome and indication, also not, one has to say, in terms of safety. I'm
Mm.
still waiting with that mechanism of action, with that multiple locations in the body where these products have an effect, whether all these effects are positive or at one point in time we get a wake-up call because there is a serious negative effect. So far, we are not there yet, but real-world data are an excellent tool to make these observations in a standardized and statistically correct way.
So how is it that you take this real world data that oftentimes has to be really messy and turn it into credible evidence?
Yeah, obviously the collection of the data has to be standardized. So there are many coded ways. ICD-10, for example, clearly has to be used. Medications also have to be coded. These days, we also have methods where we can translate unstructured data into structured data. Artificial intelligence can extract information, diagnosis, treatments, signs out of free text, which are in physicians' letters, in hospital records. They are pretty good in doing that. Of course, it needs quality management, quality standards, controls, whether these tools, these natural language processing tools, these NLP tools, are actually doing the right thing or are misunderstanding the language. But it looks as if they are doing quite well. So the data quality has to go from unstructured and messy into structured and organized and standardized. And this can be done. The next step is also to ensure that the population is really well defined. What you do in a clinical trials by in and exclusion criteria. In the real world, you may also have to exclude certain types of population because the data may be incomplete or they may have a kind of a concomitant medication which would interfere with the outcome. The same thinking which you do for clinical trials. And then when you compare groups, since there is no randomization, you may have a bias by treatment or other types of bias that people, because of their treatment, because of their disease, get a certain treatment. And suddenly you are tempted to assign certain outcomes to the treatment, but actually there are consequences of their underlying disease, which was the reason for the treatment. So this kind of confounder, bias by confounders, they need to be dealt with, and there are methods which there are
Mm.
propensity score methods which can make populations which you compare, make them comparable and make them equal. But still, the lack of randomization is always a part when you compare populations where you have to be very careful whether you get tricked out by the real world. Uh,
Sure.
One example, it has nothing to do with medicine. I heard that younger people have more fatal car incidents than older people. Sounds reasonable, and you would suddenly would say, yeah, let's make a law that you have to be 28 or 35 years old before you get a driver's license or this kind of stuff. What actually turned out to be behind this is that younger people usually drive older cars because they
Mm,
have less money. And the older cars have less driver assistance security systems like collision warning, lane departure warning, and all this kind of stuff. So actually, what created the difference was not the age of the driver, it was the age of the car.
mm,
And these are things which can be confounding biases where one has to be very careful before one overinterprets differences and findings. And then we are suddenly even in fake news and disinformation. If people argue with data, with numbers, and create an ideologically motivated conclusion, whether it is immigration statistics or economy statistics or so, because numbers are always seducing. You believe numbers, but it's not that
mhm.
easy. You have to understand what you're talking. So it's an amazing topic. It's an interesting topic, and you can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, I find it. I mean, I remember from my statistics class long, long ago when the instructor used the example of that people that eat ice cream had more occurrences of drowning, having nothing to do with eating more ice cream in the summertime than and being in the swimming pool or more frequently, but just the fact that you were eating ice cream and tying that back to that fact that again you could tie two irrelevant pieces of data potentially together, and at the end of the day make an irrelevant point seem relevant based on the fact that you've
Yeah,
presented two
that's
facts that
that's
seem logical.
that's why I now select the water instead of ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Very good choice. But it's also a good time for me to ask you another question. So, how do you balance the complementary strengths of randomized control trials with real world evidence when advising sponsors and regulators?
Yeah, it's first, it's very important. This is not a competition. Uh, Clinical trials and real world data are an excellent complementary method. So it's not what is better, what is more credible. In the beginning, it was like that. We all scientists, we are here to make mistakes in interpretations or uh, in assumptions, and then we are learning, and then we put the learning into our future activities. So initially, yeah, there were ideas to, for example, compare clinical trial results with real world evidence results. And was important that people did that to find out where are the differences. The only thing, one could not claim that these results have to be identical because there are different scenarios. We have said in the beginning, clinical trials have a very selected population. Clinical trials run in a very artificial treatment protocol with treatment standards, visit standards, whatever is tested is according to the protocol. So it's really an artificial environment which does not happen in real life. One has to say no patient is treated as well as in a clinical trial, with all the attention, with all the quality control, with all the informed consent processes, placebo effect, Hawthorne effect, and so on. So one cannot expect that real world data bring exactly the same result. In the contrary, sometimes real world data disagree with the clinical trial results. And then this is a question also for the regulatory agency. Uh, did we do the wrong decision if we only believed in the clinical trial? So these two worlds are complementary, and ideally, the initial phases, of course, follow the very strict and safe environment of a phase two study, for example. And then later, you become a little bit more liberal and you move a little bit more to the reality. And you complement a phase three study with real world data, or this is a discussion for the future with the regulatory agencies, where you get a preliminary approval after good phase two studies, and get a mandate from the FDA to run the phase 3 with a preliminary approval, with a product already on the market, but with strict supervision by real world data. And after a few years, you have to deliver the real world data. This would be a new paradigm in the regulatory processes. We had something similar during COVID when there was a huge rush to develop a vaccine. But this could be also an idea for regular treatment and for development of new therapies, also where new therapies are urgently needed in rare diseases, orphan diseases. We partially have already.
Now lost him again, unfortunately. Well, folks, I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with regards to the overall session here. Hopefully, we stay on LinkedIn and we can get Manfred back one more time. Um, Normally, there's got to be some level of technical issue going on in the Amazon servers or something like that that's causing this type of technical challenge. So it is my apology to anybody that's in the audience, and hopefully we can get an edited version right back out to everybody. And I'll try and conclude the interview here with Manfred if we can just get him back one more time. The interesting point that I think, comes out of this is, that in this book, he's trying to break down some really key elements, overall. Defining real world evidence is really key, obviously, but then also combining this idea of combating misinformation and keeping up with the misinformation in, um, just the things that we should be considering overall that could be happening. How do we then provide a broader application to that and think more worldwide in terms of public health and democracy and social cohesion and all of those sorts of things? How do we apply all of those elements to that as well? And then um, the last part being critical thinking. How do we consider critical thinking in this process, as well? And I'm looking away because there's several things, sort of resetting on my side as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the interview here. We'll look to try and get Manfred back again to just have a better interview experience. Again, I'm not exactly sure what's happened with this feed and why we're having such technical issue. But again, I've moved offices recently, and because of that move, it may be the core issue at heart. So thank you so much for watching. If you're still there, if you're not, um, I wish you the best 2026 if you are, and have a great day and rest of your week. Thank you.